So in the next subsection, I want to show you what you can do with the suffix tree, taken for granted that we can construct it efficiently in linear time in the length of the text. For that, there's one more thing we need to add that's written down here. And just as a reminder, the trie is really stored like this. It's a compact trie, so only the first label on each edge, and we store the index where the next character is compared with, etc. On the slides, I will always represent the suffix trees like this, where you see the entire string that would be on this edge if we would spell out all the characters. And then I can leave out the index in the internal nodes. A second thing that will be, it's a technical detail if you want, but it is important for the running time statements that we make, and it's also easy to achieve. I assume that all internal nodes, so every of these red guys, has a pointer to the leftmost leaf in its subtree. So in this case, it's kind of trivial, but in general, it could be that it's not so clear how far away the next leaf is. In particular, it could be in this example, there's always the case that you have just a single edge to go to some leaf, but you don't necessarily know which edge that is. Here it always happens to be the left in the picture. But I think that is coincidence in this example and doesn't necessarily have to be like that. So it's just an assumption. Every red internal node stores one pointer, which goes to the leftmost leaf in the subtree. It's not super vital that it's the leftmost. A leaf is usually enough. If you wonder how you could construct those if they're not already there, you represent this tree somehow in memory, and then you do a bottom-up traversal, and you can start from the leaves. You keep in mind in the recursion what is the leftmost leaf, and then you insert this once you go back up the tree. And you can always, when you go from two internal nodes back to the parents, you can inherit the leftmost by taking it from the child. All right, not sure if I use this very often, but T sub I is just a shortcut for this suffix starting at I. I think that should be it. Now the first application will be our good old string matching problem, the text indexing version thereof. I'd like you to think about, before I tell you how it's done, how the suffix trees help with that. So if we have the suffix tree of a text like on the left, and I want you to work on this specific example. You can make it a bit bigger if that's small. What does the suffix tree tell us about occurrences of this pattern Anna in the text? And I know this, you can read the entire text from the suffix tree and then figure it out, but that's not what I want you to do. I want you to ignore that the text is known and just work on the suffix tree and try to figure out what does the tree alone teach you about the occurrences. Is that kind of well defined? I'll leave the slide up and just have 10 votes. So I'll give you a few more minutes, seconds. In a way, this question contains all the things you've learned about tries and suffix trees. So I think it's an important one. So I'll give you a bit of time. 25 votes in. If you figured it out where it occurs and you figured it out on looking at the text, try to go back and see if you can argue just on the suffix tree. Okay, 36. I think I'll show you the results and briefly on the screen as well. So we have a lot of votes for the fact that P occurs in T, and that's true. And in addition, we seem to be able to tell that it starts at index 1. So let me switch back here. It starts at index 1, but it actually also starts at index 3. Not sure if that was clear for all of you. So let me just show you how you would come up with this conclusion in the tree. Okay. So we have to find this pattern A and A in the suffix tree. It's a trie, so we do what we always do in a trie. We search by starting at the root. We follow the branch for A, N, A. And now we stop because we ran out of pattern. So what does that mean? We found some internal node here. Now, first observation, we didn't get stuck. We could follow the path. So there are ways to continue this pattern into a suffix of the text. And that means it definitely occurs somewhere in the text because the pattern is a prefix of a suffix of the text. That's nothing else than fancy words for saying it occurs in the text. Right? There's a part of the text where the pattern occurs at the beginning. Moreover, all of these suffixes are in the subtree of this very node that we stopped in the search with. All the patterns that are extending all the suffixes that start with the pattern are below this because they all follow the same path up to this point at least. So the number of leaves below this, there's 2 leaves. That means there's 2 occurrences of the pattern in the text. And if you look at the index in the leaf, that's the index where the pattern occurs. And so that's exactly the indices 1 and 3 where we find Anna in the text banana ban. Okay? Good. So if you follow this, then the algorithm on the next slide will be quite natural. And that's our first application of suffix trees, our good old friend string matching. Just that in this case, we tend to think of it that the text is static and we search several times, but we don't have to. So one way to do string matching is construct the suffix tree for T, and then exploit this fact that I mentioned before. P occurs in the text exactly if and only if P is a prefix of a suffix. And so here's the algorithm spelled out again that we are following to find these occurrences. We search the pattern in the trie by following it down from the root. And then there's really 3 different options in theory, in principle, that can happen. If we ever get stuck, so there's 2 options, 2 subcases if you want. We are at an internal node and the next character of the pattern, there's no edge from this node that we can follow. Then we're stuck at an internal node. We can also get stuck inside an edge. Remember, so here we have several characters on an edge. Maybe we try to find BAA and not BAN. Then we would fall out of the edge with the 3rd character. Now remember, we would normally not discover this until we jump to the leftmost leaf and then start comparing from there. But let's ignore that fact and abstract from that here and assume we have all the characters on the edge is present. So that's two ways how we can get stuck. If we ever do get stuck, that means the pattern doesn't occur in the text because there was no single suffix that started like this. So I can't continue following this path. The other option is we run out of pattern as in the previous example. So we could read the entire pattern and we end at some point in the try. And that can be either at an internal node, like in the previous example, or it could be in the middle of an edge. But both are really the same in this case. If you check the characters inside the edge, then the pattern occurs at all the indices of the leaves in the subtree of where you stopped. In theory, there's also a third case. We could run out of tree. So we could traverse and traverse with our pattern, and then we reach a leaf, and the pattern would like to keep going. This can't really happen in our scenario because we added this dollar sign. So if dollar doesn't occur in the pattern and we kind of enforce that, then we can never reach a leaf because the leaves always have as last character the dollar sign, and that's forbidden in the pattern. So that case doesn't occur. If it would occur, we could still handle it by going to the leaf that we reach and check if we find P there. So in total, the algorithm follows the path of the pattern, and after at most length of P steps, you found one of the two cases, the first or the second. And so you can either say there isn't a match in the text, or you can report at least one occurrence in constant time by following the next leftmost leaf pointer. That was the green one before. So that's how you can find a first match in the length of the pattern time. If you want to report all matches, you can also do this, but you can't keep it in that time because the pattern in the worst case could occur at every position in the text. So even to just produce the output, you need more time. But how you would do it is if you wanted to report all occurrences of an A in the text, you would go from the root to A, and then you would just walk through the entire subtree and report all the leaves you found. That's linear in the number of occurrences. So you can report all occurrences in time length of the pattern plus number of occurrences. And that's, again, best possible. You need to read at least the pattern, and you need to write out all the positions where it occurs if that's the goal. So you can't really beat that. OK, that was the first big application of suffix trees for string matching. I have some examples that illustrate all the possible cases. What do you feel like? Shall we go through those, or is it clear enough without the examples? Who wants to see examples? Who does not want to see examples? OK, so I'll go for the middle and go through all of them, but quickly. I'll try. Let's do this one. So ANN, bloop, I fall out of the tree. So that's a case of we get stuck at an internal node. OK, doesn't occur. Let's see if I run out of colors. BAA. So BA, and then bloop, I fall out of the edge inside the edge. So that's this case. Doesn't occur, right? I would have had to match the N. Anna was the example from before, so maybe we can skip that one, right? That was ANA. So we end at an internal node, and then we can use the green pointer to jump and report 3 as one match. BA, okay, yellow was maybe a mistake. we traverse the same edge as with the blue, but then we stop in the middle of the edge. So here it's not a mismatch, but it's this case. And so the occurrences are everything below here. So we just follow the rest of this edge. And from there on, it's the same as the orange case. And now the last one might be more interesting. That's my color for corrections. So Briar. That's a tricky one. We would normally say after this B, we fall out of the tree because there's no R. So what this shows is if you have the compact trie, you would actually just look at the first character and that matches. So you would jump over these and then A matches again. So you would jump down to this leaf. And so once you reach that leaf, you know the text that's stored there is actually the entire text here. And so you would align this like this and would notice that there's a mismatch at the second character. Okay. So that's in a sense the same as the blue one. So if you go by the proper implementation as compact trie, then you wouldn't really check these other characters until you reach the leaf. And so that's something to keep in mind. For the conceptual algorithms on the slides, I'll assume we have the full labels on the edges. And you can always handle these two cases in an implementation separately. So that you fall out of the edge or that you run all the way to a leaf but actually have jumped over mismatches. Okay? Other questions on the examples? I have more applications. And this one is slightly related to the motivating question, but we're one step ahead, one step away from that one. So in this case, we asked for the longest repeated substring of a single text. So we have a text, and we would like to find two indices, I and j, so that if you start reading at I and j, you see the same substring. So maybe for illustration, a little picture. This is your text. You're trying to find positions I and j. And when you read here, you read the same string up to a certain point. So there's a length L, so that this and this is the same string. And you try to find the longest L so that you find this positions I and j. This is indeed something we'll essentially come back to in disguise. It'll be a subproblem for something later in compression, but we don't need to worry about that for now. It's also just an interesting question. I mean, a curious question. You have a text. What's the longest thing that occurs at least twice as a literal copy? Again, if you think from first principles, it looks like one of these problems where you have to go through all substrings, and so it smells quadratic. But you can actually do it with suffix trees again in linear time. It's a lovely thing to ponder about if we have more time. But I think for this one, I'll just have to give you the key insight away. The trick here is that if there is some repeated string in the text, like in this one, That means there's a suffix starting at I and a suffix starting at J, which both start with the same string, namely this green part. What does that mean in the suffix tree? Well, there's a suffix there's the two suffixes that are stored in the trie. And if they start with the same string, they share a path from the root up to a certain point, and then they diverge. So there must be a shared path in the suffix tree. And if it's the longest shared path where they diverge, it actually ends in an internal node. So let's see on an example what that could look like. In this short example, here are two suffixes, and they have the longest common prefix of just the single A. Well, if you try to find a bigger example, things get a bit unwieldy, so bear with me that the example's a bit small. But because those two have the longest shared prefix A, they share a path up to this point and then they branch off. So there must be an internal node at this position that we reach with the path A. And of course, if we go down to A, here it is this internal node. It's not so surprising here, but in general, it could be further down. It could be a long shared path. And indeed, there are other examples here of longer shared paths. We'll come back to that in a second. Now, how do we find the longest repeated substring? First observation, any internal node corresponds to some repeated substring because the path from the root lies on at least two paths to a leaf. So if we want the longest, we want the one that has the longest path from the root. Okay, so in other words, that's the longest common prefix of any two suffixes. And this brings us to what is called the string depth of a node. That's just the length of the path from the root. So maybe let's annotate the tree with these string depths. The root is at 0. Then here, this one has just A, so it's at 1. AN is 2. ANA is 3. This one has 3. It's just a single edge, but 3 characters. And so that's it. So we can do this in a bottom-up traversal again. Sorry, in a top-down traversal, in a depth-first search from the root. We start with the root at 0, and then indeed the compact trie, in a sense, already stores the string depth because it stores the index that we compare next. That's exactly the string depth. So we don't even have to really compute this. If you represent the suffix tree as on the slide, it seems like this is another step. And then the second is you just look for a node with maximal string depth. So in this case, we have two examples. So there's two longest repeated substrings, Ban and Anna. Okay. And so how much time does this take in total? We need to construct the suffix tree. It takes linear time using the magic black box algorithm. We need to find the string depths of all the nodes, but they're actually already there. And we need to find a node with a maximal string depth, and that can be done by just walking through the tree once and keeping track of the deepest. So that's linear time overall. Okay. That's pretty cool and is already quite close to this longest common substring between different strings. But there's one thing that stands in our way to solving this motivating problem. The motivating problem, where you find the longest common substring, talks about several texts. And so far, our suffix tree was always just for a single text, for a single string. There's a way, though, fairly conceptually easy, to get from a suffix tree for one text to a suffix trees for several texts. And that's called the generalized suffix tree. So that's just the observation. We would like to close the loop to this motivational problem. So we need something that works for several texts. What does not seem to help is to build the suffix tree of all the texts individually. So you could build one suffix tree each, but I don't know of a way to make use of that really. Because what we need is the information combined of the texts. We need to find the things that are repeated between texts. So I can find all the repetitions inside a single text with this. But that's not really, that's like a wrong question. So instead, what we'll do is we'll force all the texts into one big text using a little hack, if you want. We create an artificial new text where we concatenate all the strings that we have, but we separate them with new dollar signs, which are different for each text. So we create k new characters so that this $I tells you which of the substrings ends there. So at the expense of k new end of word symbols, we can construct a single text and can construct the single suffix tree for this concatenation of texts. And that's it. That's called the generalized suffix tree. There's a slight simplification you can make. If you have an edge in this generalized suffix tree that has some $j, you know that it will always lead to a leaf because these dollars are unique. They occur at only one place. So there's no way how they can be shared with different positions. So they will always lead to leaves. And so we will have for every text j and every position in the text j I, we will have one suffix. So that's the suffix starting at position I of text j, denoted like this. And we will have a leaf for each of these pairs, right? For each text and each position, we will have one leaf. And you can figure out that this is a certain starting position in this text t. You just sum up the lengths of all the previous texts and add I. So there's a way to translate between the indices in t and these pairs, which text and which index inside. That's something we'll just take for granted. Okay, a short one to wake you up. That one has nothing to do with suffix trees yet. Just reminding you of the definition of the problem before I'll show you how this works with suffix trees. I want to show you the algorithm before we run out of time, so I'll show the results, and BCA is the right answer, right? That occurs here and here and here. And here it occurs actually twice, so you can, okay, I didn't show it. In this first string, even occurs twice, but that doesn't hurt. So we hope to find this BCA. I'll show you an example for the generalized suffix tree for these three strings on the next slide. I want to briefly first highlight what we need to do. So by building the generalized suffix tree, we basically have the information that's needed there. There's only one piece missing. Any path from the root to an internal node corresponds to some repeated string. But that's not good enough. I don't know where this repeated string is. It could be just in two texts, not all, or it could be two occurrences within one text. So I need one second piece of information. And so I annotate all the nodes in this generalized suffix tree by all the substrings that have some leaf from this substring below it. We can do this bottom up by, for the leaves, just take the single string they correspond to, and when you go from children back to parent, you just take the union of all the substrings. That's how you can compute this in linear time. Then we also compute the string depths as before. And finally, we report the path to the deepest node in terms of string depth that is annotated with all the strings. So there is a leaf for all the strings below this node. And that means it's a shared substring that occurs in all the strings. Okay. N here, what I noted here is the total length of all the strings. They don't necessarily have the same length, but you just sum up all their lengths. And that's roughly the time you need to build the suffix tree as well. And all the rest also runs in this same time. So here's the example how this looks like for the 3 texts from the question. So here are these 3. You concatenate them with the dollars in between in this order left to right. And you build the suffix tree for them. And I guess you'll have to take my word for it for this one, that this is what comes out of it. And these green numbers here, these are sets of numbers, 1, 2, or 3, and there can be one missing. And you see how this is formed. You have a $2 here, so this is a leaf that corresponds to the second, respectively the first text. So you have a leaf for text 1 and text 2 below 4, but none for below this node, but none for text 3. And you do this for all the nodes. Here you have something from 3 and 2, so that's why there's 2 and 3. If you go to this node, you take the union of these, and you don't even need the other leaves to see that there's something from all 3 strings below it. So that means the path from the root to this node occurs in all 3 strings. That's brilliant, but it's not the longest such repeated one. Indeed, we find here is one that has string depth 3, and that's the biggest string depth we find in this example where all 3 are present. And the path from the root to this node is BCA. That's our longest repeated substring that you also found. Okay. So it's only a small step from a suffix tree from one text to one for several texts. And with that little trick of adding these dollars in between, you can use the construction as a black box for one text by creating the concatenation. And thereby solve this really challenging problem that at first seems to require quadratic time or more. Cool. That's the end of the first round of applications. There's more to come, but that we'll reserve for next week.